Welcome back to this Channel Futures TV episode. Terry Sweeney here, contributing editor, Channel Futures, and joining us now is Rob Allen, Chief Product Officer with ThreatLocker, a zero trust and endpoint protection platform. Rob, welcome and thanks for doing the Channel Futures TV.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are, of course, looking at how the threat landscape is evolving, both from a perspective of emerging attacks, but also how geography is impacting the nature of local and regional threats. Rob, kick us off with an overview, if you would, of what we're looking at in terms of the high points of the threat landscape in first quarter of 2025. Where are we with that?
I suppose the threat landscape is wide and the threat landscape is deep.
Sure.
It really shows no signs or evidence of slowing down. I mean, occasionally there are little wins, so ransomware gangs get shut down, but it's very much one gets shut down and 10 appear in its place. There's been a few, I don't want to say interesting gangs have appeared, but there's a few new gangs have appeared over the last year, for argument's sake, who we have seen are a lot more persistent than their predecessors. One thing I would have said to people 2, 3, 4 years ago is, realistically, they're after low-hanging fruit. They're looking for easy targets. There's the old adage about, two people running away from a bear and one stops and puts running shoes on. And he says, why you put running shoes on? You're not going to outrun the bear. And so I don't need to outrun the bear. I need to outrun you. So
Right.
broadly speaking, that held true for a long time, but the newer ransomware gangs, as I said, they seem to be a lot more persistent. Now, I have some theories as to what that might be. One of them being that in a lot of cases, they're actually paying for access. So they're buying access to environments on the dark web. So they're both emotionally and financially invested in hitting the organization that they're going after. Whereas, as I said, once upon a time, it was a case of low-hanging fruit. So it's interesting. And as I said, that's my theory.
But it seems like we're also seeing, of course, attackers using all of the same breakthroughs that we are with artificial intelligence, with the deep fakes and that sort of thing. Identity remains a huge target for so many of these bad actors. The twinned threats of phishing and ransomware, they just seem to come together. These aren't, I wouldn't call them new, but are you seeing permutations that really are disturbing and that our listeners should be cognizant of?
Well, could I just say, first of all, I'm very impressed that it took until the second part of the conversation that we mentioned AI. But yeah, I mean, look, AI is obviously an accelerant in a lot of ways, both good and bad. So obviously it can be used for good. It can be used to protect you, but again, it can also be used against you. I suppose AI in a lot of ways has lowered the bar of entry for malicious actors. So once upon a time, to be a ransomware operator, you needed skills, you needed knowledge, you needed to know how to code. I mean, there was a relatively small number of people worldwide who had those skills. Now, realistically, you can go onto one of these LLMs and just say, can I have code to do this? Can I have code to do that? So, whereas, as I said, once upon a time, there's a few 100,000 people worldwide, realistically now, pretty much anyone can do it. I mean, all you need really is bad intentions and access to some of these tools. So, as I said, it's both for good or can be used for good, but also is being used for bad.
Well, are the preventive measures equally fluid and accessible and easy to use? Like if we wanted to mitigate against the deep fakes and the other ways that AI has been repurposed against us, are there emerging tools or services or platforms that help mitigate the evil, I guess, that AI is doing?
I suppose it's like anything. Realistically, it's an arms race. It's who moves faster. But I mean, whilst I suppose AI-based detection and protection tools do have a value and there is a use in them, it's also I'm not going to say you're never going to win, but it comes back to the question of knowing everything that's bad, knowing every technique, knowing every tool. I mean, nobody knows all of the bad things, unfortunately. And as I said, with the acceleration due to AI, it's even less likely that everybody's going to, or anybody rather, is going to know all of the bad things. So, as I said, there are tools there, there are value in tools there, but I suppose one of my pet peeves or frustration of the cybersecurity industry in general over the last couple of years has been this obsession with AI. It's like as I said, it's an AI arms race. It's our AI is bigger than your AI, and our AI is better than your AI. But again, not really considering the fact that AI is just as powerful and valuable for attackers as it is for defenders.
Right. Well, in that vein, can we switch gears and talk a little bit about phishing and ransomware? Uh, Again, I like the phrase that you used about AI as an accelerant. We've certainly seen that in the phishing attacks that have emerged since LLMs became much more accessible. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're hearing from customers with regard to phishing and ransomware.
Well, fishing, I suppose, very simply has become harder and harder to spot. I mean, there was a time. I mean, I we do cybersecurity training regularly, and one of the more recent one was about phishing, and it was, here's a way to spot a phishing email. Bad grammar, bad spelling. I mean, that doesn't really happen anymore. So you can't depend on those kind of triggers. You have to be a little more nuanced in your decisions. But I mean, obviously, phishing is a huge issue. Email compromise is a huge issue. I mean, again, there are tools and approaches out there that you can use to limit that. Insofar as you can, for example, restrict access to your Office 365, use conditional access. Say, well, look, I don't want anybody except the US, for example, or if I'm in Canada, I don't want anyone except Canada to be able to access my tenancy. Those kind of things are there. There are tools available that people can and should use. But you'd be surprised how many environments and many organizations don't have any controls like that in place.
Let's shift again and talk a little bit about the geographical permutations that you see in some of the different threats that seem to maybe have a higher profile in different regions of the world. ThreatLocker, of course, as a global company, has this global view. What interesting changes or differences are you seeing, say, between North America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, that sort of thing? What sort of regional trends are you witnessing?
I mean, to some extent, the problem is a problem wherever you happen to be. I mean, it's not just a US problem. It's not just an EMEA problem. It's not just an APAC problem. The problem of ransomware, the problem of cyber threats is not specific to any environment or to any geographical location. I think for the most part, I suppose a lot of the ransomware gangs do. I'm not going to say target American organizations specifically, but American organizations certainly seem to get hit more, whether by design or by accident. It may just be it's a bigger market, there's more money. I mean, who knows what the specific reason behind it is. It's really interesting from our perspective. As a company, our second biggest market, our second largest country or customer base of country is Australia. Um, and that was before. Now we have operations in Australia now. We've infrastructure in Australia. We've got staff in Australia. We've all that has been built up quite recently. But even prior to having any of that in place, Australia was our second biggest market. And the reason for it is Australia have this thing called the Essential Eight, which is effectively a list of recommendations, shall we say. It's kind of slightly stronger than recommendations, but government issued, this is what you should do to protect yourself against cyber threats. And because fundamentally one of the things we do, which is allow listing, is one of the recommendations, a lot of companies in that part of the world went looking for somebody who allows them to implement allow listing effectively. But that's something that's really interesting. So what governments do helps. It focuses the minds of organizations because I mean fundamentally, like if you don't adhere, if you haven't taken steps to reach the essential eight in Australia and you get breached, you get much bigger fines. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a carrot and a stick thing, but it's basically saying, look, here's some sensible, practical advice as to what you should do. You should really implement it. By the way, if you don't and you get hit, you're going to get a much bigger fine. So that kind of stuff helps as well. It certainly helps organizations focus on what they should be doing.
Well, in terms of keeping an organization and its data and its users more secure, um, talk about some best practices that organizations can adopt or really make part of their everyday operations that don't just mitigate, but also really help on the prevention side of the equation.
Um, one piece of advice is don't just focus on the bad things. Most cybersecurity to this point has been primarily concerned with bad things. So ransomware, viruses, malware, all that kind of stuff, keyloggers, all that kind of stuff. What people need to understand is good software is just as likely to be misused as bad software. So, I mean, I can give you any number of different examples. We've seen putty being used for data exfiltration. I mean, WinRAR and 7-Zip have all of the characteristics of ransomware. They can encrypt data, they can transfer data, and they can delete data. I mean, that is literally what most ransomware attacks entail. So if you have a user in your environment that is able to run WinRAR, you have all of the things that are required for a ransomware attack already in your environment. It's just a question of someone getting access and using that. So as I said, don't focus just on blocking bad things. Consider all of the other things. And look, there are a couple of examples. Remote access tools, another great example. I mean, there's so many different remote access tools, and so many environments don't even know how many remote access tools are running on their machines. I mean, I've spoken to customers who's had 5, 6, 7 different remote access tools actively running on machines on their network that they had no idea was there. I mean, AnyDesk is basically the remote access tool of choice for ransomware gangs. You know, if you see AnyDesk running on one of your machines, there's probably a reasonably good chance that it's being used for malicious purposes. Um, Orclone is another really good one. So it's kind of the data exfiltration tool of choice. So they've more recently pivoted. PowerShell used to be the tool to exfiltrate data before, because you can exfiltrate data with a single PowerShell command. Just upload all of these files to here. They seem to have pivoted quite more recently to, as I said, this tool called Orclone. And again, if Orclone is sitting on your network, if it's running on your network, there is a reasonable likelihood, and you don't know anything about it, there's a fairly good possibility that it has been used by a bad actor, and it's probably just a question of time before you get that email to say, hey, we've got all your data. Do you want to pay us for us to delete it?
Rob, close us out with some comments on zero trust and what organizations can do with regard to endpoint protection to maybe not make themselves bulletproof, but to significantly enhance the defenses that they have. How has that evolved? I mean, zero trust is an established tool or set of strategies to reduce risk. What's happening on that front?
Well, I mean, the first thing for people to understand is it's not a product. It's not something you can go out and buy. You can't say, I want to buy some zero trust today and go out and buy zero trust. As you said, it's a set of strategies. It's a way of looking at things realistically as much as anything else. What I would say is layered defense is important. Defense in depth is important. One of the things that we see quite often, though, is very often people will layer similar tools or similar things on top of each other. So they might have an antivirus, an EDR, an MDR, an XDR, anything else that ends with DNR, basically, that seems to come out every 5 minutes. And basically, all of those things are doing fundamentally the same thing, which is looking for the same known threats, looking for the same known bad things, and very often falling over each other when they do actually find something bad. Whereas proper layered defense should have different types of defense. So, for example, what we talk about primarily is control. So it's allow listing, what can run and what can't run. It's ring fencing, what things can do. It's network control. It's storage control. It's all about control. So it's not, we don't concern ourselves tremendously with what is good and what is bad. We concern ourselves with what is required and what is not. So that's two different approaches, two different strategies, which work extremely well in tandem. But if you put all of your eggs in the detection basket, all of your eggs in the I'm going to wait until ransomware appears and runs, and then I'm hopefully going to stop it. It's probably too late. Your data's already out there. It's on the dark web. As I said, putty's been used to exfiltrate it, or Orclone has been used to exfiltrate it. And realistically, it's a cleanup operation at that point. So detection alone is not enough. Detection is important, but detection on its own is not a complete strategy, which, as you said, is where zero trust comes in. So balance, controls, and detection, and you will have much, much better outcomes.
That's great stuff. We will happily rely on layered protection until a completely bulletproof silver bullet, I guess, comes along to keep us all safe. Rob, that's a great place for us to close. Thanks for making the case for a layered defense. It's certainly what we have to rely on till a true silver bullet emerges to protect us. Thanks very much for joining us for this Channel Futures TV episode.
Thank you, Terry. It's been a pleasure.
We've been talking with Rob Allen, Chief Product Officer with ThreatLocker. This has been Terry Sweeney for Channel Futures TV. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.